Welcome to lecture number 3, Counseling Approaches, Person, Problem, and Process. The outline of this lecture is going to be introduction of counseling as a process, principles of counseling, knowing the person, knowing the problem of the person, and knowing the process that we are going to adopt as far as the counseling is concerned. The number one thing that we need to understand that counseling is a process. It's a continuous process through which the client and the counselor collaboratively work together on the goals. So there is an initial phase, there is a continuation phase, and then there is a final phase to the process. It's not an unending process. And as we deal with this as a Christian counseling, Bible is a final standard of authority for the counselor. And the indwelling power of God combined with the responsible actions of man work together for the solutions in the problem. So a relationship of spiritual bonding is absolutely required. And the scriptural foundation is the past is not denied, but it is dealt with. And the message of counseling and restoration does not have any barriers. Anybody can be restored. And Christian counseling ministers to the whole person, the body, mind, and spirit, not to just a compartmentalized area. When secular counseling teaches living with your problem, Christian counseling deals with casting it off. Secular counseling is based on the theory of evolution, but we base our counseling on the theory of creation. Secular counseling aims at edifying oneself, but Christian counseling edifies God. When secular counseling or the human mentality passes the blame from one person to another or responsibility, Christian counseling deals with accepting one's mistake and then moving on by restoring and confessing through restoration. So, goals of Christian counseling: helping a person to learn who he is that God created him to be, helping a person effect a change in attitude, helping a person to accept God's plan in their life, helping them to deal with the problems of selfishness in their life, helping them to learn to forgive. All those are part of goals of Christian counseling. There are some secular principles of counseling that we would like to introduce in Christian counseling as very important principles. One is individualization. You don't look at the individual as a mass. You look at an individual as a unique person with a unique problem. The Bible says man is created in the image and likeness of God. We are uniquely and wondrously made. The second principle is the principle of acceptance. Simply stated, it is accepting the sinner but not the sin, neither condemning or condoning the behavior, but accepting the person as he is and then not passing judgment on him or her, but helping him sift through the problem and resolve them. Non-condemnation, or in other words, it is non-judgmental principle. You don't approve or disapprove a person based on your previous understanding. You don't jump to conclusion based on your first sight of the person. You allow the process to work in order for the person to be able to be helped. Self-determination or self-direction. Christian counseling, neither secular counseling, is enablement. It is encouragement, it is equipping, it is igniting, it is empowering, It is helping to help themselves, but not enabling. It is allowing the counselee to identify the goals in his or her life and making decisions for himself or herself. That's the process that the counselor helps the person. The most important principle of counseling is confidentiality. Counseling matters must be kept confidential, except in two situations. One, when the health and safety of the person who is getting the counseling or the person around the person who is getting the counseling is going to be affected. If the person says homicidal ideations, meaning wanting to kill somebody, or suicidal ideations, wanting to kill himself, that is a problem that you will need to go and let somebody else know. And then the other is when law and order is affected. When law and order is affected, meaning the person brings a situation to you whereby the person says that he has breached the law, confidentiality principle is not in effect. So these principles need to be borne in mind as we look at the three things: person, problem, and process. So when you're looking at the person, there are 5 philosophical assumptions that we have to have. 1, every created person has innate dignity and worth. Every person is interdependent. Every person has basic needs that needs to be met for proper growth and development. Every person has the potential for growth and development and has the right for the realization of this potential. And the final thing is, society has an obligation to help those people who have not had the means to the realization of these potentials. So these 5 philosophical assumptions need to be borne in mind as we look at the person as a whole. Now, basic elements of knowing the person. An individual's behavior is conditioned by his or her environment and his or her life experiences. And some of them are overt behaviors, some of them are covert behaviors. Feeling and thinking are covert, that are hidden. But doing and talking are overt behaviors. But the behavior is conditioned by the life experiences, internal as well as external. Now, the second thing is, for human growth and development, it is essential that basic elements must be made. Physical, spiritual, emotional, intellectual needs be met. Deprivation of any of these, deprivation of love for long periods, will arrest the growth of the person. So that needs to be very, very clear. The third thing that you need to know when you look at a person is that a person's emotional needs are real. And when the person's emotional needs are real, they cannot be met or removed by intellectual reasoning. Tangible needs must be met with tangible results, and you need to be able to show tangible results in order to alleviate the problem. Example, a 3-year-old child who is crying for mommy. No rational explanation of mommy is going to help him or her get that need met. He or she needs to have mommy coming to him or her to meet that need. The only other way that we can actually help is maybe by providing a video or showing a video or showing him or her a picture of mommy. So which means emotional needs cannot be rationally explained, needs to have a tangible evidence that we are able to show. The fourth thing in knowing the person, behavior is purposeful. nobody does anything without having a motive behind it. So it's in response to the individual's physical or emotional needs. So somebody has erratic behaviors. Somebody was working properly, talking properly, acting properly, now has erratic behaviors. What could that be? Why would that person be doing so? A 10-year-old who is working so well now has started bedwetting. What could be the reason behind him or her doing that? That's something that we need to analyze before we look into the process of addressing the problem that is outside. There may be something more inside. Maybe sexual abuse may have taken place, and this is regressive behavior. So what is a hidden motivating factor behind that? Other people's behavior can only be understood in terms of one's own emotional makeup. So that's why we say that the principle of self-awareness is very important. We tend to make our own assessments. We tend to label people. We need to have a full self-awareness of ourselves in order to know the person that we assess and the person that we counsel. So, behavioral concept for understanding the person, fulfillment of needs equates to proper growth and development. A person is well-rounded when there is good fulfillment of needs in love and security, sense of belonging to a group, feelings of self-esteem, opportunity for physical and mental growth, guidance and direction. In all these areas, fulfillment of needs gives rise to proper growth and development. Now, there are building blocks of a life of a person. There are three areas. One is the spiritual DNA or the framework of the person. That is called the temperament, the hereditary makeup of the person in the spiritual realm. God created inborn temperament in the areas of inclusion, which means surface relationship, in the areas of control, in decision-making areas, in the area of affection, deep relationship. There are specific God-given, inborn temperament for a person. That is God created, God given, and cannot be altered. Now, there is a second part which is environment affected, which is character. It is learned behavior. Based on the upbringing that I have had, my character is developed accordingly. And the third is self-selected, which is a personality or the mask that someone puts on. A person puts on a mask. This is a self-selected. So these three elements combine together to make up the building block of a person. The temperament, the character, and the personality. And all these three things must be looked at very carefully when we assess the person. So after assessing the person, then only we look at the problem. The major categories of problems that we deal with are illnesses and disabilities, lack of resources, parenting and schooling issues, behavioral issues, marital issues, social issues, and spiritual issues. In the basic ID scale, in the problem areas often focused on in counseling, basic ID, BASIC we call them as behavioral problems or action problems. A stands for affectual problems, emotions and moods. S stands for sensory or sensational problems, education, schooling. And then I stands for imagery problems, thought process or the perceptions, the mental pictures. C stands for cognition problems, the thoughts. I stands for interpersonal relationships, interactions with others. D stands for diet, drugs, So basically, health-related problems. These are the areas of the problems that we deal with. Now, major contributing factors to these problems are lack of love, unhealthy child rearing or parenting techniques, overprotectiveness, over possessiveness, inadequate and defective role modeling, inconsistent leadership in home, churches, and society. All these are contributing factors. Inadequate and defective role modeling, the father being a drug addict, and the mother being promiscuous in relationship. The child grows up in an environment where the role models that he or she has is completely flawed. Inconsistent leadership in the house. The father is a very strict authoritarian parent, and the mother is a very permissive parent. She allows everything to the child. So now there is defective role modeling and defective leadership or inconsistent leadership, which causes problems. Now, non-fulfillment of needs, divergent role expectations, physical and mental illness, lack of material and non-material resources, lack of preparation for roles, and role conflict always have caused the problems that people face in their life. I spoke about overt and covert before. Every time that you look at a problem, there is an internal process and then there is an external process. The internal process is the traumatic events that are hidden, and people are expressing something in an external process, but based on something that is internal. So unless and until we have an internal plus external review, what may be the root cause of the problem that we see on the outside, we will not be able to understand the problem fully well. Abuse in the family, traumatic events unaddressed, fostered bitterness of the past, growing up with a negative predisposition towards a group of people, lack of ability to cope with situations, development of maladaptive behaviors. All these could be reasons that cause problems in life. So you look at the person, you look at the problem, and you look at that problem holistically from an internal and an external perspective. Now, before we go into the process, I just want to share with you some defense mechanisms. Defense mechanisms are our ways in which we try to cover up for our actions or try to come up with some kind of reasonings for our problems, come up with some kind of solutions on our own. Denial or shutting off from the reality, that's one defense mechanism. Rationalization, finding a justifiable cause. So-and-so who is much higher in society is doing it, so why can't I do it? Displacement, which is a domino effect. The husband got yelled at by the boss. The husband came home, the wife gave coffee, and the husband gets upset because the coffee doesn't have sugar, which is not the true case. Wife is upset because the husband is upset. The children come to play with the mother. The mother is upset, yells at the children, and the children don't know why mom is upset about, and then the children go and then kick the dog that comes to play with them. The dog doesn't understand what's going on. This is called the domino effect or displacement. The wrath arising out of the husband being mistreated at work now got out taken on the little child or the dog in the house. So that is displacement. Regression, as I said before, a 10-year-old child who's been working very well, going to school and doing well in school, getting good grades, suddenly starts dropping in grades, starting to do bedwetting behaviors and things like that. What could be why the regressive behavior being used? Compensation. Some people who are very low in self-esteem, who do not have the ability to take on responsibilities and perform them, but they try to portray this macho image, but that is a compensation strategy that they adopt. Projection. Projection is projective identification. You're projecting the blame of your actions on somebody else. I did it because of so and so. That is projection. Daydreaming. Daydreaming is when we tend to drift to fantasies. But we are trying to overcome our problems by drifting to fantasies. None of these defense mechanisms are bad on their own. They can be something that can be used effectively, and they can be something that can be used positively if used in small amounts, if used in a balanced way. Many times what happens is that we do utilize these defense mechanisms to a point where we really do not know where we need to put a stop to it. And it just continues on to a point where it becomes uncontrolled. It's almost like stress in small amounts is good, but when stress is uncontrolled, it becomes anger-related, problematic, aggression-leading, volatile behaviors. So defense mechanisms have to be looked at, especially in assessing the problem, knowing that these people probably are coming with a defense mechanism. So the counselor should be well aware of the possible defense mechanisms that the counselee might be adopting. Knowing the person, knowing the problem, now we go to the process. What does the process entail? We define the problem. Now we assess and diagnose the problem formally. We clarify goals. How do we clarify the goals? We set intervention and problem-solving strategies through SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, timely goals. Goals that are set specifically to address a problem. Those that can be measured, whether we are able to meet those goals or not. Achievable, within the short frame of time that we are going to have the therapy, are they achievable? Realistic, are they realistic for the person that has this problem? Timely, are we setting specific time for the goals to be achieved? These are very important in setting the goals. Closing session does an evaluation of the outcome. Most unfavorable outcome would be, in a rating scale of the course, would be 1. Less than expected would be 2. Expected level would be 3. More than expected would be 4. And the most favorable would be 5. So that's how we kind of look at the process. Now, how do you approach the process? Listen to your counselee with your ears and your heart. That'll be number one as you set this process out. 70% of the time, the counselee comes with a need for someone to listen to him or her. Listen to them with your heart and with your ears. Let God's word speak to you and through you to the counselor. The counselee should see scriptures in you. And also, you should be quoting the scriptures. This is totally different from secular counseling. Keep your appointments on time. You are a role model, and you exemplify that role model in being professional in your etiquettes, being professional in your mannerisms, being professional in your timeliness, being professional in not sharing your personal problems upon that person. Understand that the person has come with a problem. Your job as a professional Christian counselor is to help the person deal with that problem and resolve that problem. Do not judge them. Do not become self-righteous. Do not be proud that you look at me. Do not depend on yourself than on the Lord. Do not refuse to release the counselee. Your goals are smart, which means it's timely, and you have to release the counselee on time. Do not get spiritually, physically, or emotionally attracted to the counselee. Your boundaries must be kept intact. Do not have too much compassion. Your relationship is not sympathetic, it is empathetic, meaning you're putting yourself in the shoes of the person. Do not give advice and make decisions for them. You empower and equip, you don't enable the person. Do not spiritually manipulate the counselee. You have to make sure that your efforts are very professional, your words are very professional. Do not use the gifts of the Spirit or the gifts of the Word of God to manipulate your intent into your counselee. What are the dimensions of the process? There are three primary dimensions to the process: getting information directly, getting indirect information, and then giving help. Getting information directly would be verbal communication primarily. Getting information informally or indirectly would be nonverbal, and giving help would be interview as well as the relationship building. So we'll get into this in detail and specifically. The initial phase will be collecting pertinent information, doing the intake, doing the application, setting a plan, setting a contract, explaining the ethics of the counseling process, collecting cues, never siding with one person if it is a marital counseling situation, warning the counselee that things could get worse, not giving any false hopes to the counselee, praying with your counselee and for your counselee, encouraging them, keeping on schedule. That's the initial phase of the process. Now you get into the process. Tool number one is listening. When you listen, always make good eye contact, which means you're doing a purposeful, active, attentive listening, which is crucial to the process. It is consciously making that effort to be not selective. Avoid any type of distractions, formulating an answer while the person is talking, showing anxiety on the face of the counselor, doing selective counseling while they are saying something that is irrelevant, looking away, not being or being preoccupied, not having a very quiet and conducive atmosphere for counseling. All those things must be taken into consideration. So listening is process tool number one. Process tool number two is observation. General outward appearance of the counselee, facial expression of the counselee, posture, gestures of the counselee, especially when the counselee is talking specific problems. How does the facial expression change? How much of covert behaviors, pain that is hidden, is now coming out as expressed behaviors? Those are non-direct, indirect cues that a counselor gets through observation. A body-mind relationship in understanding the problem is very crucial. Now comes the interview process. It is not casual conversation. The process of counseling is not casual conversation where two people just chat. It is structured, pointed interviewing, which means your questions are face-to-face, direct with the counselee, whereby you obtain information to help deal with the problems, identify and meet the goals. It is studying and assessing the counselee's problem through pointed, structured questions. Through all this, your interviewing process, through your observation, and through your listening, you're also creating process tool number 4, that is creating a relationship. A counselor-counselee relationship connected to each other in a very significant way, but in a positive, professional relationship. It is bound by a time, boundaries, and specificity. It entails very tangible and concrete things that you want to achieve, and you foster growth in the counseling through that relationships. There are some specific techniques that I want to share with you. Some of them might be a little too hard to understand at this point of time, especially in this basic counseling course, but I will mention them, and as we deal with other situations and other problems and other courses, we'll be able to understand them a little bit more. Acceptance, making the counselee feel welcome. Assurance that the counselee will not be judged. Facilitation, allowing the counselee to vent his or her emotions. Accrediting, making the person feel confident when something good is said. Encouraging, allowing the person to complete a sentence. Giving some action-oriented support. Getting something done for him. Advocacy, making a request in support of the counselee. Reflective discussion based on the deep thinking, certain things that you know as a counselor that this is very important. So allowing that to go into a more reflective discussion phase. Motivation, not advice, but giving help in such a way that through encouragement and equipping, the person is encouraged to make suggestions and observations. Clarification. Sometimes they come with confabulated things, so many things that they have in their mind, and now you break those problems into pieces of the puzzle that you can actually focus on. Modeling and role playing. Certain times a certain scenario needs to be enacted, and you as a counselor can do that role playing and the modeling so that the counselee can understand how to deal with a situation. Reality orientation. Sometimes they beat around the bush, maybe because of their emotional frenzy, maybe because of the fact that nobody has redirected them. Now, your job is to orient them back to reality. Partialization, breaking a situation down into the significant part and the insignificant part so that you can look at the significant parts a little bit more carefully and thoroughly. Interpretation, explaining a counselee's behavior in terms of the psychological meaning of it, why he may be reacting to it from a psychological perspective. Universalization. Now, be careful about this particular technique. Universalization is not universalizing the problem, but letting the person know that he is not the only person having a problem in this world, that there are millions of other people who are going through situations similar to what he or she has. Confrontation needs to be used very carefully. Sometimes when they manipulate, you use confrontation as a technique so that you can bring the person back into reality orientation. So the techniques, the summary are, you provide supportive techniques to improve resources and also to improve internal processes. It's more than a bag of arsenal of techniques. It is based on the limitless love and the bountiful strength of the Word of God. Talking is therapy. It is thinking, it is sifting, it is clarifying, it is release. Talking is therapy, and that is counseling. Galatians chapter 6 verse 1 says, "Brethren, if any person is overtaken in any misconduct of any sort, You who are spiritual, who are responsible to and controlled by the Spirit, should set him right and restore and reinstate him without any sense of superiority and with all gentleness, and keeping an attentive eye on yourself, lest you should be tempted also. This is just a basic understanding of how we should start the process of counseling. As we look at more detailed courses, we will understand the counseling techniques and the process more in detail.